Here's a rudder kick, and I can't remember which sequence it'll be, but we're accelerating to the next data point, reconfiguring him with speed brakes. You'll see a rudder kick there. There'll be a roll input or a pitch input. I forget which pitch input comes first. And now a pitch back to the angle of attack we desired. Doug Cook is out here, I think, in the audience. He was the one who helped develop all these maneuvers. Okay, I've got the stick back now, finally, and I'm starting the pre-flare. Dick is getting ready to put the gear down. We can't see our touchdown point up here yet. It's right about up in here. And we're in the flare, floating up to touchdown now. Now, we're not done getting data yet. When we touched down, we still had a couple of directional control data points we wanted to get. Here's where we're going to touch down, right about there. You'll see the nose veer to the right. I've engaged nose wheel steering to see how sensitive it is. We'll veer off to the right. And then Dick and I, we decided and we had differential braking to see how effective they were. Still sharing the load. I pushed the right brake, Richard pushed the left brake, and we had practiced this in the simulator, but we didn't practice letting off quite good enough. We got a little bit of a wobble here at the end, but it was not noticeable from the ground cameras, so we were okay on that. And we ended up pretty close to the center. But we were able to split that time. Now, one more thing that I want to share. We were known as really the serious crew, the Christian crew, if you will, as I recall. We had a kind of a theme song, really. It was our alma mater. And you may remember the country western song, Lucille. We had nicknamed Fitz's 747, Lucille, because it didn't have a name. And so we named it Lucille. And on STS-2, which was a much more benign flight than this, we had agreed that we would pull one on Fitz. And if the sound guys, if you could put Commander Truly or Admiral Truly's mic hot, Dick, we didn't practice this, but you know it, the routine. We would come up on separation, and Fitz would call 3, 2, 1, SEP. I would push the SEP button, and we broke into, you picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille, with 4 hungry children and a crop in the field. I've had some bad times, lived through some sad times, but this time your hurting's for real. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille.
You heard it first here. Yeah. Thank you very much, Joe. And Dick. You're up, Brewster.
Okay, well, that's a tough one to follow for sure. But Columbia was a tough orbiter. You know, Columbia is the first launch vehicle of any kind that on its very first flight of all of the flight elements of that stack, it carried people to orbit and got them back safely. And it continued to do that for a very, very long time. And God bless John Young and Bob Crippen for giving us all the chance to follow them into orbit on the space shuttle. Ascent, in first stage, all of the orbiters are pretty much the same. First stage is just this thing like that because of those solid rocket motors. They're so rough. But once you get rid of those in second stage, the orbiters are it's this nice smooth push, especially so on Columbia, because Columbia, being the first one designed and built, had about 7,000 pounds or so more structure. So it was a very stiff vehicle. When I compare that to Atlantis in second stage, you could feel it oil can just a little bit. And Columbia was just this rock-solid thing all the way to orbit. What a great ride that thing provided us. And so my experience with John is on STS-9 with the 4 smart guys that we had with us doing Space Lab 1 mission. And we had to do a lot of maneuvers on that flight, and this was early in the program, and the software hadn't been refined very well, and so we had to kind of do these maneuvers one at a time, and you'd type them into the computer. We did 216 maneuvers over the 10 days, and it took us something like 15,000 keystrokes to do all those maneuvers. So we spent a lot of time punching those little buttons on that thing. But the real interesting part of STS-9 relative to the orbiter itself, and you know, I don't blame this on Columbia at all, it's just the nature of the beast was when we were getting ready to deorbit. And we had, you know, it's got 5 general purpose computers, the main computers. 4 of those run together in a redundant set for ascent and entry, and the 5th one has got backup flight software loaded in case you have a generic software problem. You can push the little red button and the fifth one will take over. Well, we had GPCs 1 and 2 up running flying the machine during the deorbit prep, and GPC 4, I think, was running the systems management stuff. And we had been flying on vernier, the little 25-pound thrusters, the whole flight, so we did these gentleman maneuvers for the science guys. And we had re-enabled the primary thrusters, and the primary thrusters are like these big cannons. When they fire in the back end, you know, it's not too bad. But when they fire in the front, it really gets your attention. As John said, it'll wake the dead. Well, we got to a dead band in the autopilot, and one of these things fired up front, and immediately we got big X pole fail on the CRT. And what that means is the computer has failed. So GPC number 1 failed. And to that point, we hadn't had a GPC failure that I remember on orbit. And so, you know, we get out the pocket checklist and start going through one GPC failure malfunction, and about 6 minutes later, we get to another dead band, and the primary jet up in the front fires, bam! And big X pole fail on CRT2, GPC2 just failed. So now we got 2 of our computers failed, and nobody's home flying the ship from a GPC standpoint. So we activate another computer and get it under control, and we start talking to the ground and everything, and we do what's called a dump, and that means you dump the memory contents of the computer down to the ground, and they analyze it and everything, and then you do a initial program load. And GPC-1, we never got to recover at all. We did get GPC-2 to come back online, and so the ground didn't feel comfortable having us re-enter when we were supposed to, so they waved us off for, I think, about 4 revs, and they were going to analyze the situation and take the proper action. So we had this time period to wait, and John had been up since we were running 2 12-hour shifts, 24-hour ops, you know, with 3 people on one team and 3 on the other. John had been up a long time, so he went downstairs in the middeck to try and take a little nap while we're waiting around. And so he was down there, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours maybe, and finally he came back up to the flight deck, and he was very angry with us. And he says, gosh, you know, I try to go down there and sleep and get a little rest, and you guys are up here making all this noise, banging around. And when I told John, well, John, that wasn't us banging around, that was our inertial measurement unit number 1 beating itself to death against the gimbal stop, his eyes got about that big. Because now we've got two GPCs with a problem and an IMU with a problem, broken. And so we had to set ourselves up for entry in a different configuration than we normally fly entry. But we did that. The ground gave us right instructions, and we got the thing set up all right. And then we flew entry, and entry was pretty nominal from that standpoint until the nose gear hit the ground after we landed in derotation, and when that happened, GPC-2 failed all over again. So, you know, but that's okay, because there's still other GPCs, and we just rolled out and stopped. And then an unusual thing happened during the post-landing operations when I was getting ready to shut off the auxiliary power units, which are the units in the back that make hydraulic power to run your flight control systems. One of them declared an underspeed failure shutdown. And then, so we kept going through the process, and just as I was shutting off another one, it had an underspeed failure shutdown. And you know, John and I didn't know what that was all about, but we got a call later on and that told us that APUs number 1 and 2 both had the same failure, a failure of a shaft that inputs the hydrazine into the gas bed generator, and that had spewed hydrazine all around these APUs in the back of the orbiter. And when we got down to about 40,000 feet, there's enough oxygen, and the APUs are real hot, it started a fire back there. And so we were burning from about 40,000 feet down on these 2 APUs. And then after shutdown, more hydrazine came out and finally detonated and made a real mess in the back of Columbia that they had to fix up before we could fly her again. But you know, yeah, other than that, it was pretty swell. But I tell you, it was a real thrill to have the opportunity to fly with Captain John Young, a man who I have the greatest respect for, and I sure wish him well. He led us into space in the space shuttle program, and look at all the human beings we've offered the opportunity to experience the thrill and the privilege of space flight with this system. And I think I must be out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brewster. That brings to mind the old saying, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like to play? So, okay. Dick, you're up next.
You bet. Thanks. I'm here representing Challenger. She was named for His Majesty's ship Challenger, which was a research vessel that left Portsmouth, England in 1872 and changed the course of science. In 3 years, sailing around the world and doing oceanography, both in the Atlantic and Pacific. Challenger, the space shuttle, was in our fleet less than 3 years. During that time, in less than 3 years, she flew 10 missions, and of course was lost on January 28, 1986, as we all know. Her loss changed the course of space history, and it also changed the course of my history because I got pulled out of where I was in Naval Space Command to go back and be responsible at headquarters for the investigation and the recovery. But all of that is another story worth another long panel. In those 10 missions that she flew, frankly, it was a hell of a ride. She launched the first Tidris. She launched the first woman in space, the first African American in space, and that picture of Bruce McCandless untethered on the first untethered EVA with the black and the stars behind him. But for Dan Brandenstein, who was in the right seat on our flight, STS-8, the first that meant the most to me, I can't speak for Dan, was that we got to make the first night launch and night landing of the space shuttle program.